Let me throw it over to you, Daniel Hokama, from Perupetro, General Manager of Perupetro. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Well, my background, I am a mechanical engineer from the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. I have an MBA and an energy major in the HEC University of Montreal. I have almost 20 years of experience specifically in the energy sector. From the electricity as a point of view and hydrocarbon point of view. Nowadays, I'm working in the hydrocarbon industry. Previously, I was on the electricity sector. So I can say that I have a broad view about the energy sector. Regarding your question, well, this situation is different from any other industry, I think. We have more than one issue, not only the COVID, the virus, that is attacking the demand, but we have the price crisis that affects the whole industry as well. So this is a situation where I think demand and supply are affected at the same time. I think it's the first time that we have a crisis in both sides. So it's difficult to face this situation, and but we see this as an opportunity, because we as a country, we are not a big player in the hydrocarbon industry, but we are a kind of a boutique country. We have a lot of potential. We have a lot of things to offer to good companies. Nowadays, with this volatile market, the energy sector is in Peru is facing this situation with a lot of responsibility and efficiency. Actually, by law here, the oil and gas and electricity sector never stop. We have a big compromise with our country. We're still producing, and because of that, some people don't think in how important is energy. They take energy for granted. Imagine hospitals without energy. Imagine the people. We are in quarantine for more than 60 days already. Imagine our life in houses with no fridge. You have to go outside to buy food almost every day, and you expose yourself every time you go out. Here is a complete quarantine. You only have permit to go to buy groceries and some specific things. And actually, the energy sector, I mean, not only oil and gas, but electricity sector, it has a big compromise with our country. And we are operating with a very, very high safety measures, and because of the COVID, of course, and of course, the people that are working in those industries are taking a risk. And you can, I think it's important to show this because people will take energy for granted. For instance, in our country, we consume like about 250,000 barrels per day. 69% of our energy consumption comes from hydrocarbons, 23% from natural gas, mostly to produce electricity. However, in this situation, we've been affected by the diminishing of demand. For instance, electricity declined 30% in consumption because of the business and industry are closed. Some mining are still working, but most of them are closed. And the reason a thing here that you have electricity in your home, but 60% of consumers delay their payments. So the payment change is in trouble and is on a high pressure. So you have the consumer that is not paying, and the producer, and the whole change of value, the value change is suffering this situation.
That's actually, wow. You've hit on a lot of things we've talked about in some of the other panels. In fact, we had a report that was written about exactly sort of the demand destruction of electricity. I mean, we've all seen a lot of the reports globally about demand destruction on fuels and oil market products, but the electricity sector, for example, in Argentina, had been significant, and sounds like significant in Peru. You mentioned natural gas. I want to come back to that. But let's talk a little bit about, and your background allows us perhaps to have a broader conversation than just oil and gas. We're talking in a lot of the other sessions about recovery, right? And we're starting to navigate crisis and move towards what we could call day after recovery. So the question for you is, from the government perspective, what are the conversations about how a recovery looks? What kind of stimulus, what kind of policy package? We've seen broader fiscal stimulus packages in Peru has been noted in the media across the world for, or at least in the hemisphere, for the ability to inject some fiscal stimulus a little bit more than other countries in the region. But dial that down to recovery for energy and how a stimulus or a policy package looks like for the energy sector.
Yes, I think that the government is trying to help the economy from the demand point of view. I'm talking about energy. The government issued a $10 billion package aid to help the economy, basically to apply a competitive and a secure source of energy in order to help the economy to recover. So the mining sector is shut down mostly because some of them are still working. However, they have the same problems as the hydrocarbon sector. For instance, storage and cash flow. Those mining companies that are still producing, they are storing their production in some places, but there is a time when they need to sell these products, and they need, of course, cash flow. They are mostly here, mining companies has a very high capacity to stand, but at some point they are going to start selling that production, and because the markets for them are mostly abroad, that means that it's impossible to sell their products. So we understand that the next move from the central government is to open the borders, not completely, but at least to start, the commercial transactions, mostly because of the mining sector. The mining sector is the one that moves the needle here from the economy point of view and from the energy point of view. So specifically in the hydrocarbon sector, sorry, somebody want to talk?
No, I was gonna actually ask you specifically. No, you read my mind, because I was gonna ask you to exactly specify. My understanding is there are some specific measures being developed and implemented to incentivize or to help incentivize investment. Let's call them changes in adjustments in fiscal and contractual terms. So maybe that's what you were about to say. So why don't you jump in on that, and then we'll.
Mhm. Okay, nowadays we are working in the urgent measures. Okay, the ones that are going to help companies to survive and to pass the wave that we are suffering nowadays. As a hydrocarbon agency, we're working in an emergency sector clause. That means that we are going to include in our contracts specifically a clause that is going to establish the conditions and the premises that we have to define in the contract, because you have to bear in mind that usually the contracts are normal, regular conditions, and we are not in a regular condition environment. So we have to define specific clauses regarding the payment of royalties that we are working on that. You can defer the payments of royalty. You can defer investments and some other clauses that have to be applied in order to help the company from the cash flow point of view.
So you emphasize, I think it's important, the distinction between sort of what we could perhaps call navigating the near-term crisis and then, emergency measures, and then moving towards more of the medium, longer-term, recovery phase. And obviously, Peru will be competing for what we all understand is reduced capex, reduced amount of capital available for investment, particularly in some of the upstream. I think some of the questions we've kicked around a lot in the last 2 days, the issue of break even for some of the provinces in the region, obviously Vaca Muerta, the pre-salt. Peru obviously is focused a lot on gas. Let's take a question. I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Jose Chavez was at one point in time held the job you hold today as general manager of Perupetro. So he's already he's firing on that. His former his old colleague here. He wants you to talk a little bit more in detail about how the companies are managing, particularly LNG exporters, these challenges. From your perspective, you've talked about what the government's doing. You talked about how you can help these challenges. So maybe a little talk about what the government.
What is the specific question? I mean, you're talking about how we are dealing with companies?
Yeah, well, I think it could be interesting.
Are dealing with companies?
So you've talked about the extreme lockdown and some of these measures, particularly not mining, but from your interactions and obviously what you're hearing, what are companies doing to navigate the companies in Peru?
Well, the situation is very hard for everybody. Actually, if you are talking about natural gas and LNG and liquids from natural gas, we are talking here in Peru about camisea. Camisea is the main source of natural gas and liquids in Peru. We have a LNG plant. The prices are very low nowadays, and they are suffering because of the costs. They are trying to deal with the price, and they are trying to deal because of the contracts that they already have, and are of course related with some commodities, the price of commodities, and here the demand diminished a lot. So this is the specific situation of camisea. They diminish their production like almost 50%. Okay, they are in a lot of pressure, but they are still working. They are still producing because of the necessity of the country to still the necessity of have energy. However, the reality is different from the companies that produce oil, mostly oil, that are on the northwest and in the jungle in Peru. In the jungle, we have almost all the loads, the companies are shut down because of the COVID, because of the virus, and because of the logistics. We have our main oil pipeline is closed, so companies are not able to move their production, so they have to shut down. And in the northwest, there is a economic prices. The main reason, beside the COVID and all the expenses that generates the implementation of new protocols and everything, is the price of the oil. We are working in the new rules, so we can issue more competitive royalties, depending on where are you and depending of the type of hydrocarbon, and the royalties are going to be linked from the producing point of view and from the price point of view. So it's going to be a different, it's going to be hugely helpful for us. We understand that we have to take advantage nowadays that Venezuela is a sleep giant, and everybody's waiting for that awake. And we have to take a good companies. We have here in Peru 18 basins, and only 5 are producing. So here in Peru, from the applying specifically from the royalties point of view, we are working on fiscal measures as well, but are more complicated, and I don't want to give information before we are secure that they are going to pass. And we also are creating like a special partnerships with companies to face together the social issues. We have social issues here, and are important. And we are looking also for a flexibility for some environmental permits, because we understand that technology is different nowadays, and we have the impact of the environment is going to be less because we are using a different technology. And infrastructure is a must, and we understand that one of our issues is infrastructure. We only have one natural gas pipeline from Camisea to the coast. We develop the downstream business from the natural gas point of view. It's not like Colombia, for instance, but it's still growing. We have well, nowadays we are diminishing the production of liquids of natural gas. And we understand that in the whole area of Camisea, looking to the south, there is a huge potential for more natural gas. So we are working in order to attract investors in those areas, but we understand that if you don't have infrastructure, it's going to be difficult to take your product to the market. So we are working in expand our transportation facilities in order to look for new projects. And it's not only pipeline. In Camisea, for instance, you have a process plant there that is on a full capacity nowadays. So you need to invest in a process plant as well. So it's about incentive. We understand that we need to incentivize companies to giving them the infrastructure that they need, the economic framework, the rules. Peru has a good reputation for stability from many points of view, and beside the political things that always are create a noise. But at the end of the day, companies are still here, and we have a very good legal and economic framework. Some people believe that the hydrocarbon sector is going to I don't want to use the word dead, but it's going to diminish a lot in the new years because of electric cars. Actually, there are people here that because of the electric cars, we are not going to need hydrocarbons anymore. And when you talk with those guys and you tell them, okay, you got your electric car, but you need electricity to run them, of course, right? So 50% of our electricity production comes from natural gas. So there is not a way, for at least for a medium term, that we are going to be 100% renewable. So I think that natural gas is going to be the transition, but that means that we need to look for more reserve in natural gas, and that comes from incentives. I remember when I used to work in a natural gas pipeline here, that we need to work faster, because the day that Vaca Muerta in Argentina uh, transforms itself to Vaca Viva, is going to be more difficult to us to compete with that size of market. I mean, now Vaca Muerta is huge. It's huge. You need a lot of investments. Here, maybe you don't need too much investments, but the production is not going to be as big as Vaca Muerta, but you have a lot of natural gas liquids here and has a lot of value. And one of the main sources of value in Camisea were the liquids, the natural gas liquids. So I think that as a country, we need to create incentives to companies to come here and take the risk to explore. But we need to develop infrastructure. That's for sure.
We're running out of time, and I appreciate you've done a perfect setup for the final discussion we'll have today about natural gas and LNG with Alvaro Rios in just a couple of minutes. But let me wrap up with Daniel Hokama from Perupetro. The issue of social engagement, social license to operate. There have been conflicts in the energy mining sector, obviously, in many countries. Peru is not alone. Just take a minute to wrap up here in how you see managing community engagement, stakeholder engagement, and really helping. Let's say you've incentivized and you've attracted enormous amounts of investment from energy and mining companies. How do you make sure that it's a friction or low friction in terms of social engagement and making sure communities are managed properly?
Well, it's a hard question, actually. It's a hard question because every time you deal with people, everything is unknown. You cannot predict the reaction of people. But something is very clear. They want to share the 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 revenues. We can say the revenues or the value creation of where you are developing. But it's an important thing, and we always said that there is important to take it to have in mind that there is a exploration risk. When there is exploration risks, somebody is going to risk his money in order to maybe find nothing. So at that point, it's very important to explain to the people something first. If I find something, let's work together how we are going to develop this. But sometimes it's difficult because we have the oil and gas business, mostly oil, many years ago, almost 100 years. And you know that the industry used to work different like nowadays. So they have that in mind, this paradigm that oil is like something that is not too clean. And we have to work on clean that thing in their minds and to show them that we can grow together. And we are working on that. There are political issues, of course, but we understood that the people, they want just opportunities. And we are trying to give them opportunities. But the opportunities is going to come after I find something. Before, it's like very difficult to commit in something. That is an important thing that we have to explain to them.
That's fantastic. Look, you took an extremely complicated topic and one that I'm sure you work on every minute of every day, and that was a great answer in 2 or 3 minutes. So I appreciate you wrapping up so nicely. Peru is open for investment. We look forward to the letras chicas in terms of the fiscal incentives and just exactly what you were talking about in terms of the royalty contract revisions and some of the specific changes, adjustments you're going to implement in Peru. Thank you, Daniel. We greatly appreciate you jumping in. Best wishes to the team there, Seferino, Yesken, and everyone, Silvana and Vilma. We look forward to seeing you in person here in La Jolla next year. Thank you for joining us today.